Welcome back to Primary Source China Investment. This week we're on show M7, and we're talking about rare earths and the broader context of trade, because anybody that's been paying attention has obviously seen these huge headlines. And there's a habitual line stepping with the US and China now in terms of what they will do and what they won't do. This past week, it was all about rare earths and how it was a retaliation for the US blocking chips to China. This was all complete with very scary headlines. And, Pengwo, we've been talking about this to anybody who will listen, that these skirmishes, or this is not even a skirmish anymore, it's just the playbook is going to continue and we're never going back. It's going to get worse, and everybody from CEOs to consumers has to adjust. And, this week we're not going to become experts on graphite or gallium or germanium or antimony overnight. But with a little help from Perplexity, we can find out just how rare these elements are, how debilitating it might be for the US if they were somehow cut off from that, and also how dominant China is. And after all of that, I'm not worried. China doesn't have a monopoly and hasn't exported germanium or gallium to the US, Japan, or the Netherlands for 18 months. China refines more than it mines. The U.S. has plenty of graphite in places like Graphite One, Alaska, Kellyton, Alabama, Vidalia, Louisiana, and on and on. And four, the U.S. has plenty of gallium and germanium in a place called Round Top, Texas. And fifth, antimony hasn't been mined in the United States since 1947. Well, that doesn't mean there isn't any deposits like the Stibnite Gold Project in Idaho. Just think about this next administration. If there is any question about drill, baby, drill, or if the incoming administration has any hesitation to drill for rare earths or anything, stop right there, because the administration is going to go pedal to the proverbial metal. So, Pengwa, I want to get into the bigger trade issue, but do you agree with me, or do you think this is a game changer? Like, what's your take right
I
now?
think that is a long-term topic. So it's definitely not very new, but very scary. People always talk about that. It's over at least a couple of the decades. So the primary reason is China's produce the rail. It's cheap.
Mm,
Definitely not worth like it's a true value. Think about it. If like the Australia or Europe or United States can produce such a final product, not the raw material. So how much they will charge? So that is over the years. So China really export those things like the regular metals, and especially recently because of the conflict after Trump take the power in 2018. So that is this get hotter and hotter. So I think overall is China is producer as of the 2020, China produce 70% of the rails on the earth, but the consumption is 75%. So it's still need export of 5%. Uh, I think China right now had an advantage for the entire supply chain from the raw material to the final product. So whatever China doing the best is kind of the threat to the United States. That's the
yeah,
same. The problem is, according to the Elon Musk, right? The U.S. government waste trillions of dollars. Have you seen anyone invest like the 1 billion to the rail Earth rail industry, educate some people and do something? The problem is they just don't want to do the work. So that is really the fundamental reason. It's very complicated if you want to redo it right now.
sure. I think what I've been reading and from people I've been talking to, the problem isn't the rare earths themselves. The problem is in the US, it's very difficult to just start digging for them. It's not that we haven't, the US doesn't have proven reserves. It's just getting a mining permit is not easy. And I do think the next administration is going to make that a lot easier. But there's also substitutes, right? There's plenty of innovation that's going to disrupt all of this because,
Yeah.
graphite, for example, there's plenty of substitutes already, and the world is big, and there's plenty of sellers. But your point about the supply chain is important, and that's what we should be really looking out for the next leg of this trade war. Will the US start slow rolling the import of electronics and electric equipment? And will China slow roll buying the US's agricultural products? These are the top two import versus export between China and the US. The US imports a lot of the electronics and electrical equipment, and China imports a lot of the United States agricultural products. Note, this is a bigger problem for China, and this doesn't get a lot of attention. China's GDP is 18% of the world, but 30% of global exports. China's consumption is only about 15% of global consumption. That makes it reliant on demand in other countries to absorb its enormous excess production. So if the United States sort of suddenly puts their hands in their pockets for these big areas that they import from China, computers, broadcasting equipment, these sort of big ticket items, that's where China has to rapidly find new markets for. Similarly, the US is going to have to find new markets for soybeans, integrated circuits, other agricultural products. That's where we're sitting with the trade war right now. And, we've said it before, the trade war will continue to escalate. It is not de-escalating.
Yeah,
Do you
the
agree with
only
me?
question is who will take the responsibility if failed in the trade war? So you will say nobody take any responsibility. I don't care, it's win or lose. So I want to start it as long as I have such desire, just do it.
Yep, that's
Then
exactly true. No, you're
yeah,
exactly right.
and
W-
then lose. Or obviously, if they win, then they will feel happy. If they lose, they have no responsibility. So that's the key problem, I think.
I can assure you, the politicians in the US, they will claim victory even in defeat, regardless of policy. But remember, Hongguo, you and I did a show in July of 2023, and we called it, without any irony, the US and China are divorcing. And like a lot of divorces, there are plenty of skirmishes before a split is finalized. And sometimes the parties realize that the cost of divorce is too high. We may get to that point. Absolutely, we may get to that point. But
So,
until then,
we read, there's a lot of the article that analyze the future as long as Trump retake the power. So most of the interesting things is the U.S. military definitely refuse to decoupling. That's almost 50% of the rely on the China supply chain. And so that is number one. If any trade war, U.S. military probably the major resource or major power to connect the both countries.
yeah, I think people are underestimating a few things. The first is we didn't get into this situation over a short period of time. China's dominance was gradual. It took 20 years, maybe 30 years. Similarly, this, let's call it a divorce or decoupling, whatever you want to call it, it started 7, 8 years ago. So we're already 7 or 8 years in. And I will not discount innovation to provide solutions. I'm not saying, China is replaceable. I'm not saying that at all. All I'm saying is every company and every consumer has to be looking for alternatives, whatever that alternative looks like. And that's
Yeah,
just a
that's everybody try to get the backup plan alternatives. That's totally makes sense.
yeah.
The key things is you really need to build up sustainable relationship and make things really produce positive result rather than cause the whole set of the mess and then back to the starting point again.
Well, I think that's your point, right? Right now, there's a lot of talk about just, break the system and then fix it later instead of fix the system and break it later. So,
Yeah, we can see like the Australian red wine producer,
yeah,
and then they started back to the China market again and
yeah.
restart everything from the scratch. So they just wasted a couple of years. That's it.
So we're going to monitor it. But if I'm going to bet, I'm going to bet on more and more skirmishes, more and more decoupling, more and more import restrictions, those kind of things, absolutely in the cards on both sides. And, we have a chart for that as well. The number of import restrictions against China and, the ASEAN nations as well. So we'll throw that up. But we're going to leave it there for show M7. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.